Turbo was just released, and she's definitely one of the more complicated characters. And the complicated part isn't just about her kit and her rotations, but also whether or not you should pull her. On one hand, she's good. On the other, she's standard. And another third hand is that there's the rebate. So should you even pull her or try for the rebate? So in this video, I'll try to give my first impression of this character after using her and testing her for the past couple days, as well as providing you with some numbers, especially comparing with Twins and Tempest Wind, and also our information on the 5-star weapon as always. So let me just give you a quick overview of her kit. It is one of the more complicated one. So she's a physical strategist that buffs a good amount of pierce, as well as other stuff like attack percent, damage percent, and she also gives extra action to herself. Oh, I want entire section talking about her rotation because it's very interesting. But anyways, for A0, she starts with 90 velocity stacks, and then she will gain 10 more stacks if you have more than 160 speed for each action, and this includes her own extra action. At the start of Turbo's turn, and if she has more than 120 stacks, she can use those stacks to convert into extra action. And this extra action also has a 1 turn cooldown. And another thing is, when the total velocity stacks reach 100, 220 or 350 stacks, you will get torque boost. This torque boost is basically a party pierce rate buff. So on top of our own skills that can buff pierce, the A0 can also buff pierce. But I will talk a bit more about this also because it's a little bit frustrating because the pierce rate is going to be different for every turn because it's based on the accumulated velocity stacks. And the funny thing is, for A0, you cannot get to 15%. You do not get enough velocity stacks. I will show you again more details in the rotation section. Only 10% is maximum. You can only get to 15 if you have her at A1 or if you use like Joker or something, somebody else that has extra action. Because extra action also gives you extra 10 velocity stacks. So skill 1 is a physical AoE damage, and this damage is actually not bad. It's decent damage. It also increases the damage of your party. Then when you use this skill during extra action, you buff this skill's damage, so you do more damage. And it also guarantees crit on the main target. Skill 2 is an AoE party buff and also defense buff. If you use this skill 2 during extra action, you get shields. Skill 3, this one buffs pierce rate to your party, and if you use it on extra action, you increase even more pierce rate for the main target. So this one can get up to like 15% total. So you can get like 15% here and 10% here. So you can get up to 25%, which is quite big. The highlight is also a pretty good one. I think it's comparable to like the Twins and the Tempest Wind highlight. It's pretty good. So it buffs both attack and also damage. Then a passive, this one increases party's damage during extra action. So this one is mostly useless unless it's like Joker or something. So only extra action to get this buff. Then the other one is just Turbo's own damage increase. So she does more damage. So what's her rotation? Her rotation is actually very complicated because there's no fixed rotation for Turbo. Before.net recommends 2, but there's way more than 2. This one is a very typical. This one is the safest one. This second one is the safest one for burst damage DPS. So Haru uses this. Kasumi can also use this, but only A1 Kasumi. I will explain that why later. Then this first one, I don't really get this one. I don't really understand, if I'm being honest. It does have the pierce buff for turn 2 onwards, but yeah, it's very strange to extra action here because you can just do it here, if that makes sense. Because the later turns usually do more damage. But yeah, anyways, point is many rotations for Turbo. I'll show you 2 of them today because those are what I tested. So here's a rotation. This is not the final rotation for SOS by the way because it's not, I wouldn't say not the best, but I'm using Sawamoko here mainly because I have her as a control for my testing. Because the stage effect is starting to do physical side move every other turn, and I can do that with Sawamoko, so I can test Tempest Wind fairly. But anyways, there's a few interesting things and a little bit frustrating stuff you need to remember if you're trying to make rotation for Turbo. Like I said just now, her A0 gives you different pierce rate depending on the total accumulated velocity stacks. So let me just show this to you. At the end of turn 3, you only get to 210 velocity stacks. This is not enough. You need 220 to get to level 2 torque boost. And on the final action, it's only 340, which is 10 less than the required 350 velocity stacks for level 3 torque boost. It's actually very frustrating because you're just 10, you're just one action away to unlock the next tier. I think they did it on purpose. And you can only get to, the required velocity stacks either by having another character that does extra action, or you have A1 Turbo, because A1 Turbo gives you more velocity stacks per turn. So back to her rotation. we know for a fact that on turn 3, it's still level 1 proc boost. It's only starting on turn 4 where it becomes level 2, and it's going to be level 2 all the way. So the question now is, what pierce rate should I use for my defense calculation? If you look at this one, I wrote here, include A0 turbo pierce on turn 6, 10%. This one is 5%. So basically what this means is, this first one, I need 5% less pierce because my calculation is based on only the last turn. But if I exclude the last turn's pierce and only take into account third turn, I need 5% more pierce. You can see at 22.6 and 17.6, 5% pierce difference. And the results are very similar. I honestly have no idea which one is better. I think I need to do a bit more testing, but if I have to pick one, I think I will pick the higher pierce. Because you can imagine that if I put lower pierce, on turn 3, I will do less damage. Turn 6, I will do the max damage, but turn 3, I will do less damage. If I get the 22.6% pierce, the higher pierce, I will do big damage for every turn. Because I don't care about A0 turbo pierce, but I don't care about her 5-10% or whatever level torque boost is, she has. So I think I would choose the higher pierce rate. But just make sure that when you try to increase pierce rate, try not to reduce your other stats, like your crit multiplier, crit rate. Make sure you still hit the crit cap of 100% and of course the pierce rate also. So now we can actually talk about like this specific rotation. You'll probably think like it's really weird. Why am I doing extra action on turn 2 and turn 5? Isn't it turn 3 and turn 6 better? No. I tried it above here. No. It's worse. The reason is because my A0 Kasumi cannot get enough stacks. The step stacks. Turbo can give her the extra step stack because she does extra action. So she can move one more time and Kasumi can launch an extra auto skill 1. So it means that I have to extra action on turn 2 and turn 5. And this means that I do not get the enhanced skill 3. So I will be losing this 7.8, this is like 9.8%, 10% pierce rate, the enhanced skill 3. But that's fine because I can still keep the defense anyways. So the point is that rotation is actually quite high skill. It depends on your pierce rate calculation, defense calculation, whether or not you need the enhanced skill tree. Because sometimes, like for this case, this rotation, I do not need enhanced skill tree. I have enough pierce. So that means I can completely skip doing the enhanced skill tree and I'm still okay. So while turbo is often regarded as very good because of our pierce, thing is, sometimes you don't actually need that much pierce. If you have enough defense debuff, like for example, Wonder, I'm doing Rakunda, Frausa, using Futaba, Resolve Labor, Departure Control, a lot of defense debuff already, I actually don't need that much pierce. I only need 17.6 or 22.6% pierce. Well, it's true that I can put the skill tree enhance, reduce this to 12.6% pierce as possible, but I don't need to because I can access the high pierce on my cards or on Kasumi. It's a different story if you cannot. Okay, so it really depends on your rotation. And if you don't have enough defense debuff, you can just replace Rebellion with another defense debuff move. But in return, you need to increase the crit rate of your Kasumi because you cannot get crit if you skip the Rebellion. So yeah, this is just part of rotation making and stuff. It's a little bit complicated, I know. A lot of stuff needs to be considered. But yeah, now I'm still going to talk about rotation, but I want to talk about specifically the extra action. Extra action is pretty cool, and you can also unlock some extra stuff. For example, I can do a Futaba skill 2 here. You probably might have already noticed. So on the last turn, this highlight and this skill tree has all 3 Futaba skills, skill 1, skill 2 and skill 3. So that's pretty cool. Another thing is, if you look at my cards, I did not run Trust and Prosperity or any Prosperity card at all. That is because extra action kinda is a Trust and Prosperity because it gives you extra highlight charge. So I can still do the normal rotation. You can see that it's still on regular like the zigzag pattern. Same rotation pattern because of Turbo's extraction, and I can completely skip Creation Worry or whatever Prosperity set. So actually I forgot to talk about something. A1 Kasumi. If you're A1 Kasumi, you can actually Turbo extraction turn 3 and turn 6. So your rotation is going to be different if you're A1 Kasumi. But that brings back the point of me saying that she has different rotation for different characters, different awarenesses, different pierce requirements. So she is a very, I would say, complicated character to use, or maybe more appropriately, she's a high skill character to use, and that makes her very interesting. So I'll show another rotation. This one is with the Haru team. So with Haru team, it's quite a standard, I would say typical, maybe a standard turbo rotation. You enhance skill 3 on turn 3 and turn 6 because that's Haru's burst damage, and this one should be the best one for her. You may argue that okay, maybe I can do a skill 3 here or something, but I haven't tested it, but I don't think it's going to be better because pierce rate typically for AoE isn't as effective. This skill 1 also gives you a good amount of damage buff, So you probably notice I also start with skill 1 first because skill 1 is the better skill compared to skill 2. Skill 2 is attack buff, skill 1 is damage buff, and damage buff is typically the better buff because attack buff is too common already, if that makes sense. And it becomes oversaturated quite easily compared to damage buff. And with this rotation, I have skill 1 and skill 2 active the entire time. And then I have skill 3 on turn 3 and turn 6. Now let's talk about weapon. So, a 4-star weapon just increases her own attack and her own damage. So a 4-star weapon is actually pretty bad. It doesn't buff anything at all for the party. You know, for the 5-star weapon, it gives you 15 speed. Then it also gives herself 100% attack when you are at 180 speed. And when you use a skill, for every 40 stacks of velocity, you increase the party's damage. So you need 200 velocity stacks to cap the damage at 17%. Honestly speaking, on paper, her 5-star weapon is very weak. It's literally just a 17% damage buff and it only activates at like turn 3. So first 2 turns you don't even get this max 17%. So we can do a comparison to like Tempest Wind for example. Tempest Wind, 13% crit damage and also 13% damage. This one is 17%, so this one is already worse. But the reason you pull for a 5-star weapon is not because of the buff, it's mainly because of the speed. She has a very high speed requirement. With Fire.net, you can just refer here. It says here 176 or 180. 176 is for the skills, 180 is for the 5-star weapon. Because again, this one, the 100% attack. This one is not that important though, this one is just our own percent damage. So 176 minimum if you have no Mindscape. Yeah, Mindscape that increases by almost 20 to 194. I have a 5-star weapon and I barely hit 194. I have like 196 in battle, so just barely. With that in mind though, how much better is the 4-star weapon compared to the 5-star weapon? So here is the data. It's only 2 tests, so not enough. I still need a few more results to confirm this. But it seems to be about maybe 5-8% like that, which is kind of typical for a support 5-star weapon. Maybe slightly higher than average. And the reason is mainly because of the speed. Like I said, I barely hit the speed cap. If I don't equip the 5-star weapon, I'll be losing 15 speed. And that means all my buffs will buff less. However, should you really pull for the 5-star weapon? If I'm being honest, right, I'm more inclined to say no, because she's a standard character, and when she drops, you can just spend your Salamander coin, 10 of them to get the weapon. You need to wait 6 months, but you can save gems. So I think my recommendation is to try maybe 2 things. Number 1 is to try to hit the speed cap of 176 without the 5-star weapon. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I barely hit the cap of 195 including the Mindscape. Mindscape gives you 10 speed. So you can try to max the Mindscape there and see if you can hit 176 speed. If you cannot, you can try for the weapon, and I guess more specifically, you can try for the rebate. You get 20 pulls back if you pull 70 times, which is a hard PT. So if you win the 50-50, that would suck. Maybe. Depends if you want a weapon or not. So again, my recommendation is to just try to hit the speed cap. If not, you can try to pull. Don't be shocked if you win the 50-50. Recently, I did a poll asking you guys who you think is the best buffer. And if you have been watching my channel for a while now, you know that I put the twins in high regard. And I will go as far as to say they are the best character in the game. But the question is, can Turbo dethrone the twins? Twins is better than Tempest Wind in like 90% of the teams, but what about Turbo? Surprisingly, only 6% of you think that Turbo is the best, even lower than Tempest Wind. But let me review the answer right now. Here are some data and some testings between the 3 on both the SOS bosses. You can see, unsurprisingly, Twins is the best among the 3. But what might be surprising to some is that Tempest Wind is the worst among the 3, even worse than Turbo. So I also thought it was very interesting that it's worse. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's gonna be worse for the Kasumi boss because Kasumi doesn't really synergize well with Tempest Wind because of Tempest Wind's passive, the requirement of hitting multiple times per skill. And as we all know, Kasumi only hits once per skill, so it's gonna be slow to charge out Tempest Wind's passive. Turbo is also better than Tempest Wind for the Haru boss, so I thought that is interesting. And I think the main reason is actually because of pierce rate. So I've done a comparison table between pretty much all 3 of them, so just to pay attention to this one and this one. You can see that Tempest Wind buffs more crit damage, but buffs less attack and damage. Tempest Wind also buffs crit rate. And I think more importantly is that Tempest Wind doesn't buff pierce. And for that fight, I do not have enough pierce. I do not have enough defense debuff. So I think that's why Turbo is just better for that team. Now another thing is that the Twins is still better than Turbo for a Kasumi team. This one actually surprised me. I actually thought Turbo would be better than the Twins. Because unlike the Twins, Turbo can actually get max stacks for Kasumi. Because again, my reminder that my Twins is A0. Okay, if it's A1, it's easily the best, man. We don't need to compare. A1 Twins is gonna easily be 10% more, so like maybe 5-6 million more scores than this. But A0 Twins cannot get max stacks for Kazumi, but Turbo can. But that's not the only reason I thought why Turbo would have been better than Twins. Another reason is that for the rotation, I was able to squeeze in the Futaba skill too, which means that Kazumi can do more damage on this action. But that wasn't enough to dethrone the Twins. The Twins are just that good. But why? Why is the Twins still better than Turbo? Even for this Kazumi rotation in this Kazumi team. To understand that, we actually have to compare the buffs. So here is the comparison between Turbo. Turbo is the top, and Twin Strategies is at the bottom. So for Turbo is a little bit confusing because some of the buff, like for example this passive, is only applied when you do damage to a downed enemy. And then this passive is also only for like Joker. So these two passives are kinda useless, I guess. But yeah, you just look at this one because this one excludes both of this 45 and 30%. So you look at this. And I also excluded the extra action skill 3. So in reality, it's gonna be 10% more if you use an enhanced skill tree. But yeah, anyway, we just look at this. Okay, and then we look at the Twins here. Then we can also look at this. So you can see that Turbo has higher attack percent. Twins have higher crit damage, but Turbo has no crit damage at all. Turbo has higher damage percent by quite a considerable amount. Turbo also has more pierce rate than Twins. And then Twins have skill amplification, which the Turbo does not have. Now with that information, what can we deduce? I think 2 reasons why Turbo is worse. Number 1, Turbo likes crit damage. Crit damage, I think, is the best offensive stat in the game. It buffs the damage by a lot. Twins buff a decent amount. Turbo doesn't buff at all. While Turbo does buff higher attack, right, and higher damage percent, and even higher pierce. Thing is, if you buff so much attack and so much damage percent, but you exclude the crit damage, it's still not enough. Let me give you an example. First scenario, you buff 100% attack. Second scenario, you buff 50% attack, 50% damage. Which one is better? Most of the time, it's going to be the latter. Buffing 50%, 50% is going to be better because you spread out the stats. You don't really oversaturate the stat. Because the more buff you give to a single stat, the more oversaturated and the more diminishing return you will get. Obviously, the more you buff, it's still going to increase the damage, but it's going to increase like less and less, if that makes sense. So it's better to spread out your buff, which is what the Twins do exactly. They buff pretty much everything except for crit rate. Another reason is the skill amplification. I said it before in my Twins review video back in like January. I still think that skill amplification is one of the most undervalued and underappreciated buff. If you forgot what it does, skill amplification is exactly what it sounds. It amplifies the skill, specifically the skill numbers. So for example, if you just look at Turbo, skill amplification is going to buff this damage percent, the maximum amount of damage percent. It's also going to buff your highlight. So your highlight will buff even more. Your skill 3 buff even more. Skill 2 will buff even more. And it also increases the numbers for DPS. So DPS will do more damage because they have higher skill multiplier. And Twins so far is the only character that buffs skill amplification. And that's also with my A0 Twins. The problem with A0 Twins is that I cannot have the 5-star weapon and the skill 3 at 100% uptime. You can only get them at 100% uptime if you have them at A1, because you can keep spamming the skills and spamming the skill tree, so you can keep activating the skill tree buff. So for like half of the turns, I don't even have these buffs, and the Twins are still better. That goes to show you that Twins is just too strong. But still, these results and testings are still in its initial phase, as you haven't touched the guild boss at all, and also need to test on next week's SOS. So if you are interested to see the final review of Turbo, make sure to subscribe, because I think we're gonna see some interesting data. Now that you have a bunch of information on this character, should you still pull her? It's honestly very complicated, like what I said in the beginning of the video, because on one hand she's standard, she's coming in 6 months, so it's a bit of a waste of gems to pull for her. On the other hand, there's the rebate. You pull 80, you get 20. Pull 70 on the weapon, you can also get 20. You also need to consider that if you skip Turbo, there's a very good chance that you're not gonna get her when she drops. For example, I have 400 plus pulls already, I still haven't got Phoebe. And by the time Turbo is out, we're gonna have like 10 characters in the standard pool. So every time you pull a 5-star, it's only 10% chance of getting Turbo. Whether or not you want to gamble is up to you. But as it stands, Turbo is overall a good character. But personally, if you already have the twins, especially at A1, because A1 twins, A1 R0 twins, very strong. And I think you should still be okay even without turbo. And if you also have all the premium supports, your cord, your Tempest Wind, twins, if you are all 3 of these already, I think turbo is okay to skip. It's actually not going to be damaging, I think, to your account.